I want you to point.
Okay, welcome to October Energy Month. This event is in honor of Energy Awareness Month, which is an initiative of the U.S. Department of Energy that's celebrated every October. At the Caribbean Green Technology Center, we want to highlight some of the amazing things happening in our community related to renewable and clean energy sources. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we discussed solar energy, and today we will be learning about electric vehicles. And please make sure to tune in next week, where we're going to hear about local solutions for sustainability that's happening right here in the USVI. Besides hosting outreach events such as the one today, the UVI Caribbean Green Technology Center has recently partnered with the VI Energy Office to develop a comprehensive energy strategic plan for the Virgin Islands. The aim of the plan is to outline potential strategies, actions, and programs that will bring the Virgin Islands together towards a brighter, cleaner, and sustainable future of energy management. This plan will establish both short and long-term objectives for progressing the territory's energy sector in alignment with community principles. And the events of this month help to emphasize the importance of developing a vision for the future that is paired with goals and strategies to help us achieve that vision. Each of the focus areas that we're talking about this month really highlights initiatives that can be grown, especially when we set our minds to it. Today, we will be discussing the transportation sector with a focus on electric vehicles and reducing emissions. We'll first be hearing from Director Kyle Fleming of the VI Energy Office, who will be discussing the coming transition towards electric vehicles here in the USVI. Then we will hear from Dr. Shelley Francis, who will be discussing some of the benefits of electric vehicles and why it's important that any electrification effort be equitable and inclusive. And finally, we'll be hearing from Valerie Askenasi of EPA Region 2 about some of the programs for emission reductions, including electrification, that the USVI is eligible for, as well as some examples from around the US of EV projects and programs. So before we get into the presentations, I just wanted to start a poll asking a few questions about EVs, which is electric vehicles. So if you're on Zoom, you should be able to see some of the poll questions, which are: have you ever driven an electric vehicle? Have you considered purchasing an electric vehicle recently? And what would be your main motivation for purchasing an electric vehicle? So while people are filling out these poll questions, I wanted to give a chance for Doug White of the Virgin Island Electric Vehicle Association North to speak, because he has a quick announcement about EVs. So Doug.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ariel. I wish you also had on your questionnaire, do you already own an electric vehicle? Because there are quite a few of us in the Virgin Islands who do own electric vehicles. And we have an association called VIVAN, the Virgin Islands Electric Vehicle Association North, that includes St. Thomas and St. John. And for the last several years, we've been doing EV rallies on Earth Day. And this year, Earth Day is a little bit in advance, but we're mentioning that to help get organized. It's on April the 22nd, which is a Friday. And our idea this year is to use the electric vehicle rally as a way of connecting all of the environmental events that are happening on St. Thomas. So if anyone is interested in participating in that, as I said, the last rally that we did, we had maybe 20 electric vehicles that were signed up and participated in it. It's a lot of fun, very easy to social distance. So I'll put my email in the chat, and if you'd like to join us, or you have an event that you would like to have included, then just please drop me an email note. So thank you, Ariel.
Thank you, Doug. And hopefully there's also EV on St. Croix, and maybe they also want to join this rally on Earth Day for
Absolutely.
EV owners on St. Croix.
Yeah, we'd be happy to coordinate with them on St. Croix.
Great. So I'm going to end the poll, and so we can see the results. And hopefully you guys can see the results as well if you're in the Zoom meeting. But it seems like in terms of have you ever driven an electric vehicle, we have 60% saying no and 40% yes. So more people have not driven an electric vehicle before. In terms of considering purchasing an electric vehicle, about 75% have considered purchasing an electric vehicle, whereas 25% still haven't considered it yet. And then for the main motivation for purchasing an electric vehicle, for most people, it's to lessen their environmental impact. And then the second most reason is to stop paying for gas. So I guess we can start our presentations now. And the first one will be Kyle Fleming from the VI Energy Office.
Thank you, Ariel. Good morning, everyone. Just want to make sure I've got screen sharing privilege.
Go ahead, Cal. You should be able to share.
Okay. And just let me know if it's coming in on your side.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Fleming, Director of the Virgin Islands Energy Office, as well as Chairman of the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority Governing Board. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar today, as transportation electrification has been at the forefront of many of the initiatives that the Energy Office has been focusing in on over the last year plus, and as well a major priority of both the administration as a whole, as well as a growing priority for the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority as well. So glad to see a healthy participation here today. I think that is a testament to the community's understanding of the transportation electrification that's happening on a global scale, and really happy to talk about today some of the areas that the Virgin Islands in particular is focusing on to ensure that we are staying in line with those trends, and as well as leveraging the technology in a space, in a territory, and an environment. I think that has a chance to benefit greatly from this transition. So I'll begin my presentation with a brief electric vehicles 101. I assume most people in the group here today are pretty familiar with the base level technology and in terms of what it can enable, but I'll just go through a couple of high level points for maybe some that may be a little bit newer to the field. So major difference between your standard vehicle and a battery electric vehicle is in that we no longer have an internal combustion engine. You have an electric motor that's driven by energy that's externally supplied and stored in a battery pack of some sort within the vehicle. One of the two things that I always like to highlight, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the future as well, but when we look at the major difference between not just the propulsion system, but also the complexities of the propulsion systems. And by comparison, your standard vehicle has approximately 1,200 moving parts, whereas a battery electric vehicle, you're looking at 300, but potentially even less depending on the technology. And looking at that, when we start talking about total cost of ownership, that's really going to be a key point, a key differentiator that I think makes a big difference, and one of the reasons why our interest, especially from a fleet standpoint, has grown exponentially in regards to looking at reducing maintenance costs. Being that it's a battery vehicle, it has to be charged, so you're no longer supplying with fuel, you're supplying electricity, and they can be charged in a number of different ways. The most common that we see in the territory is level 1 and level 2 chargers. Those are, a level 1 would be what you actually plug into your standard 120 outlet. I think people are oftentimes surprised that you can charge a vehicle from a standard plug, but it is possible, and that's done by a level 1 charger. It will take a little bit longer. You're looking at maybe from a full charge between 12 and maybe 15 hours, depending on the size of the battery pack in the vehicle. But you are able to fully suffice your charging needs from a standard 120 outlet in the home, which really opens up the possibility in that in terms of adoption, because every home, every building has that infrastructure available. A level 2 charger is the next step up, and that's really for being able to charge at a slightly significantly faster rate, which allows for better cycling. If you say you do have a more active day where you need to maybe charge once or twice to the day to support your commute in the Virgin Islands, it's less likely given the fact that we have an incredibly small footprint comparatively to the rest of the global transportation realm. But level 2 will provide a similar, could fully charge your vehicle, and you're looking at that happening within potentially 2 to maybe 4 to 5 hours, once again, depending on the size of your battery pack. DC fast charges is not something that's present in the territory as of today. And really that's been one of the primary infrastructure pieces that's been critical to the nationwide and kind of global transition, where you have long interstate commutes and drives that intermittent charging is required to support. We've talked about whether or not the applicability of DC fast charging here in the territory, and there may be some applications, maybe at the commercial level, where that may be a more favorable charging solution. However, we feel pretty confident that level 2 chargers will support the vast majority of charging needs in the territory, which significantly reduces the complexity. DC fast chargers require significant electrical integration considerations, which can be a barrier, certainly, especially from a cost and time standpoint. So being able to simplify the infrastructure build out by focusing in on level 2 and leveraging our small footprint is critical for that. Moving forward into, obviously, I think by removing the gas component of the vehicle and the combustion component of the process, we're looking at zero emissions. So people often look for an exhaust, a tailpipe on the back of these vehicles, and there is none. There is no combustion, so there is no need to exhaust any effluents from the process, from the drivetrain process. Once again, we're the territory that's at the forefront of climate change. This is something that certainly should be, if it's not already, certainly should be a high concern and it's a priority for everybody in the community, and looking at ways in which we can reduce the emission footprint here in the territory is certainly, I think, a high priority, and thankfully electric vehicles enable that. And then also as we go forward relative to the reduction on fossil fuels, obviously we know the volatility and being dependent on external fuel sources, both at our transportation needs and at our energy generation needs. It's something that's always at the forefront of our minds. And by transitioning to alternative fuel vehicles, such as electric vehicles, you're certainly able to reduce that dependence, as well as your vulnerability to that volatility of the commodity market within fossil fuels. And then transportation and energy resilience. So I always like to use the anecdote for myself. I've been driving an electric vehicle for over 4 years in the territory, and was fortunate enough to be driving one post the 2017 hurricanes. I also had a solar and battery system at my home, and as a result of that, those weeks, especially after the hurricanes, when everybody's spending hours in line trying to refuel their vehicles as well as their generators at home, I had the convenience of not having to be subject to that supply chain constraint, which allowed me, as a professional and personal, to focus more on the recovery of both my family and then also the work that I was doing at the time. It really created an opportunity that I know many people around me didn't have. And certainly it's been one of the priorities for me in terms of trying to push adoption on a broader scale, is recognizing the value that that convenience can have and hoping that that can be translated to the broader community as well. I don't want to be an anomaly in that regard. And I think that the transition that we're embarking on is certainly going to open up that opportunity to others within the territory as well. And finally, high performance, and as well as all-terrain capabilities. I think oftentimes, and one of the things we really try to focus on the education piece is letting people know that once the electric vehicles are today are not what they may have been 5, 10, or 15 years ago. These are the full spectrum of available vehicles, and from all the various manufacturers, it's clearly telling us that there is almost no vehicle class and vehicle operation that will not be able to be sufficed by electric vehicles. The number one question I still get is whether or not they can go up hills. I've driven an electric vehicle on all 3 islands except for Water Island throughout the Virgin Islands, and have had 0 issues in navigating any of the roads across the territory, even the steepest hills, and even the roughest of roads as well. And that's in a Nissan Leaf. They're growing to the availability of vehicles that are coming to market is certainly going to only extend those capabilities. And I'm sure there's always going to be a fit for every driving need here in the territory. I apologize for the typo in the title. But moving on to the Go Fleet initiative. So now that we have a kind of understanding of the landscape of electric vehicles, really one of the major priorities from the Energy Office in partnership with the Department of Property and Procurement has been the Go Fleet initiative. In this, we are focusing and working steadfastly to transition the existing fleet of the Virgin Islands, which currently comprises of about 1,500 vehicles. Of those 1,500, less than 5 are currently battery electric. To no surprise, the Energy Office accounts for 3 of those 5 vehicles. But moving forward, we are moving aggressively to fully assess this full spectrum of vehicles that we have and understand where transferability to electric vehicles makes sense for our fleet. Once again, to the point of having a small footprint and understanding the driving profiles of the territory and most of the vehicles within the government fleet, it's become clear that there's very few vehicles that can't be transferred sustainably to electric vehicles here in the territory, and specifically within the GVI fleet. So we've gone through some base level analysis, and we're also expanding that analysis further to comprehensively identify, basic down to a vehicle by vehicle assessment. And we know that recent vehicles aren't going to be scrapped for an electric, but making sure our future procurement strategies are aligned with promotion of transportation electrification. So we've been looking at everything from reviewing of vehicle procurement requests that come in, and making sure that if there is an option, an electric vehicle option available, that's a choice that's made, as opposed to continuing the procurement of internal combustion engine vehicles, especially when it's not necessary and also out of alignment with the goals of the Go Fleet initiative. Doing this also, the major points where we look at from justifying this transition is not just because electric vehicles are the biggest buzzword in the industry, and there's countless press releases that have come out from various manufacturers about their goals as well. But this is really looking at a deep dive at looking at our fuel cost, our maintenance costs, and also even down to vehicle misuse, and recognizing that a transition to electric vehicles can address all those areas of concern and cost within the territory. So this is much more than just a trend-setting initiative. This is really trying to be run our government operation more optimally, as well as open up a pathway for better adoption within the private sector as well. I firmly believe that this commitment and this effort at the government level has the opportunity to translate to easier access and reducing of barriers for the private sector to adopt electric vehicles. And that comes from expanding the charging infrastructure, creating a better supply chain of vehicles within the territory that create access to the private sector as well, and also building a workforce to support the GVI fleet of electric vehicles that will also translate to a workforce that can support the private sector needs for transportation electrification as well. So we're really looking at this holistically, and I think we recently had a press release last week that detailed some of the initiatives, and I certainly suggest everybody take a look and read of that. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the funding that came with that as well in my next slide. But the one thing I did want to talk about briefly before I transition is the EV readiness at government buildings. This is something that, as we're looking forward, not just for our kind of current needs, but then looking into the future as well. The territory is in the midst of a massive reconstruction renaissance. And when I look at a new hole in the ground or a new foundation being built or a new building being demolished for a new one to be erected, it becomes clear to me that that's a perfect opportunity to ensure that the infrastructure, the electric vehicle infrastructure needs are also being thought about during this reconstruction. So we've already began essentially a campaign and been connecting with everyone from the Virgin Islands Housing Authority to the Office of Disaster Recovery as well, and Port Authority also, knowing that these are entities that have current construction projects ongoing, and making sure that at the front of their mind is the consideration at the bare minimum to provide EV readiness within these constructions. Whether or not they're putting the charging stations in is not necessarily the requirement, but if we have the infrastructure, be it the conduit and electrical wires in place, at this stage of the construction process, it becomes vastly less expensive to integrate the actual charging infrastructure on the back end. And so we're really trying to be proactive in making sure that the entire environment of the territory is prepared for this transition as well.
Hi, Kyle, you have 1 more minute. Great.
So I'll just run through, one thing, and as a private sector, stakeholder for the most part of my life and transitioning into government over the last 2.5 years, it becomes very clear that we can talk about everything, but if there's no funding behind it, there's very little actual rubber that meets the road. And no pun intended, but feels appropriate in this sense is to highlight that all the things that we're talking about, all of them I've been discussing here today, these are not unfunded and hopeful dreams. These are projects that we have sought out competitive grants and been awarded for. The most recent being a $2.15 million grant that both the Energy Office and WAPA received specifically for the procurement of electric vehicles and the build out of an EV charging station network throughout the territory. We also have state energy program funds from the U.S. Department of Energy to fund additional charging stations, as well as support workforce development to make sure we have the technicians in the territory to support this. And we're also going to be unveiling an electric vehicle specific rebate program this year through those funds also. And those are funds that we already have. And then in the very, very near future, the infrastructure bill that has been circulating throughout the Congress and the Senate on a national level has earmarked over $7.5 billion towards EV infrastructure. So these aren't pipe dreams, these are realities. The Energy Office is here and we're working diligently to ensure that this transition happens sustainably and we're able to leverage the opportunities that this transition can award the territory. So I had a couple other slides of just examples I'll run through really quickly. This was actually last week while I was at a conference. I came across a former gas station that converted all of their pumps to DC fast chargers. And this is just outside the Washington, DC area. And this is at the Energy Office here on St. Croix. We just installed a charging station for my vehicle, director vehicle. And we're in the process of implementing a charging station array in St. Thomas at the Energy Office location as well. That being said, thank you and appreciate the opportunity to present and looking forward to any questions that arise later.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for that presentation and for letting us know about all of the amazing things that are happening with EVs right here in the Virgin Islands. So we did get a few questions in the chat, but I think we will wait till the end of the presenters to go over them, and maybe some of them will be answered in the next two presentations. So before we jump into the next one, we did have a word cloud. So I just put in the chat the link, and it's asking about what are some of the barriers to electric vehicles in the USVI. And I think that, you know, the next presenters will be speaking about some of these barriers and how to overcome them. So if you can go ahead and like fill in what you think are some of the barriers to electric vehicles, then I will share the screen and you can see some of the results. So. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, some of the barriers are knowledge, affordability, charging stations and infrastructure, awareness of EVs, mechanics, the myths about electric vehicles. I see initial cost, affordability, maintenance, WAPA, availability, storage, energy storage, pickup trucks. So I guess this is for the like bigger vehicles. Yeah. Well, you can continue to put in your responses to the word cloud, but in the meantime, I'd like to turn the stage over to Dr. Shelley Francis from EVNoire. So I will stop sharing and let her take over the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here today and have the opportunity to share some information about electrification and how it can be accelerated in the Virgin Islands. Again, my name is Dr. Shelley Francis. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partners of EVNoire. My background is I'm a former medical school professor specializing in environmental public health disparities, also serving on the national board of the Electric Auto Association. So really glad to be here. So first, because I am a former educator, I just wanted to provide an overview of the learning objectives for today's session. I want to just level set and make sure that we're all on the same page. So we'll talk about the benefits of transitioning to multimodal electric vehicles, as well as by the end of the presentation, you'll be able to identify at least one best practice, as well as understand how electrification can benefit the island. All right, so just a little bit about our organization, EVNoire. EVNoire is a technology e-mobility solutions company. We focus on e-mobility best practices, as well as e-mobility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we work on projects that are electric, connected, shared, and autonomous e-mobility solutions. And the idea is that the solutions will be able to be equitably distributed to all communities, not just certain communities. I'm particularly focusing on communities that are disproportionately impacted by transportation emissions. Our team is currently working with the 25 largest cities in the United States on their decarbonization efforts and mobility roadmap. So that's everything from electrifying ports, airports, transit systems and buses, to passenger vehicles, scooters, and e-bikes. And as part of that work, we are making sure that we center community voices and partners in that conversation to help inform what those solutions look like. So this is just a snapshot of some of our partners and clients that we work with. We work with the Department of Energy, obviously. This is just a snapshot of some of our team members as well. And I, like Doug and Kyle, I've been driving electric vehicles for probably about 5 years now. Started with a Nissan Leaf. So Here's another organization that we co-founded. So it's EVNoire. This is our membership organization, and it's the nation's largest network of diverse drivers. And so we have members in chapters across the United States. We have about 3,000 plus members in the United States, Canada, a growing presence in the Caribbean, Europe, Southeast Asia, and then the continent of Africa. So this organization works in tandem with EVNoire, and it's all about accelerating equitable e-mobility solutions. So that means we're working with communities that aren't often engaged in driving this conversation. So that might be rural and immigrant populations, it's young professionals, it's women, it's multi-ethnic communities such as African American, Black, Latinx, and more. So that is our advocacy organization. And so many of you may be familiar with the National Drive Electric Week program. So NDU is a annual event that's usually held around late September, early October. And it's a way for us to really coalesce around electrification and increasing awareness about electrification. It is a program that's facilitated by Plug in America, the Electric Auto Association, as well as the Sierra Club and EVNoire. And so globally, we typically have about 300 plus events around the world over a span of 10 days and reaching 100,000 plus participants. So it's an opportunity to talk to manufacturers, to owners like myself and others, Doug, Kyle, and hear their experiences about what it's like to have an electric vehicle. And also there's usually opportunities to test drive electric vehicles from a variety of different price points. So really an educational and informative event. So now leaning into the conversation around electrification in the Caribbean. So globally, this is really a common conversation, is an emerging conversation. There's something about electrification in the news almost every day, from auto manufacturers committing to electrify their fleets, to rideshare and gig economy companies pledging to decrease their carbon footprint over the next 9 to 10 years. And so you can see the same conversations or similar conversations are happening here in the Caribbean. And it has the opportunity to be extremely impactful given the Caribbean islands' exposure to climate change and unpredictable weather. So when you start thinking about the benefits of electrification, they're numerous, as you can see. So not only are we talking about reducing our reliance on fossil fuel, but there's an opportunity to use the vehicles, whether they're passenger vehicles or buses, as an opportunity to provide storage in preparation for inclement weather. Vehicle grid improvements can obviously also store power, as I said, to help really prepare for hurricanes and other storms. The transportation landscape or ecosystem on islands is a perfect storm for EVs, and excuse that pun. Also, when you start thinking about transportation is one of the leading causes of climate change, as well as various chronic and respiratory illnesses, cancers, and other diseases, it's an opportunity to improve public health. You're reducing tailpipe emissions, which then improves individuals' health and well-being. And then also there's an opportunity for green jobs that come along with this transition. So whether you're thinking about installing and deploying charging infrastructure to maintaining the vehicles, which require very little maintenance, there's definitely opportunities to lean into employment. And then as you can see here with this statistic, that the Caribbean has the opportunity to really save billions of dollars by reducing their dependence and reliance on fossil fuel. So this slide just speaks to the public health impacts and long and short-term impacts of overexposure to transportation emissions. In the Caribbean, specifically, about 20% of transportation emissions is a result of vehicles. And so you can see here some of the short-term exposures are respiratory illnesses, coughing, skin irritation, all the way over to the long-term impacts where you're impacting the nervous system, developmental delays in terms of brain development for young children, respiratory diseases and cancer, as well as a variety of different impacts on the reproductive and health system. Okay, so back to EVNoire and how we work in this space and how we work with partners. So we've developed this equity framework from years of facilitating research in this space. And so what we do is that we believe in a very human-centric approach in addressing issues around e-mobility. So that means we're working with community partners, we're working with decision makers and key stakeholders to really get a good understanding of what the priorities are, as well as where the gaps, opportunities are in the space. So by doing this and utilizing our equity framework, we're really able to help organizations, territories, islands, and countries and cities position themselves to address issues around accelerating e-mobility and utilizing best practices while doing it in a way that's equitable. So in terms of thinking about engaging different stakeholders and diverse communities, it's a really great opportunity to make sure that your program is impactful and addressing the needs of all communities. When we work with partners, we say that no program or policy research should be executed without community feedback. So the community or your key stakeholders need to be part of the process, and they need to be partners. And what we say is, the quote below, is that the solution to many of our pressing social problems really lies within community. And that's something that we're really committed to as an organization. So now talking about why, how, and how we do this work, you have to engage people that are most impacted by the issue. And so we do that by engaging with decision makers from diverse sectors. Those who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution, is what we believe. And so you might ask, how do you engage diverse communities or engage diverse community-based organizations and stakeholders? So what we've learned is that you have to really listen and sit still to better understand the causes, the problems, the barriers to solutions, and garner ideas to address those challenges. And communities have to be involved through participation in guiding the initiative and being transparent, as well as guiding what the solutions, the potential solutions look like. Other things to consider include, being inclusive of diverse communities and making sure that different voices are sampled or oversampled and are really front and center, because many of the times these conversations happen without the communities that are most impacted. So we definitely want to be conscious of that and remain conscious of the diversity that exists within community. Also, again, as I noted earlier, is that you have to include communities that would be most impacted and affected. Next, when you engage individuals versus community-based organizations, sometimes it may be a challenge knowing who the right person is to work with. But community-based partners have a breadth and depth of expertise working across communities and with different partners. So they can also be a bridge and serve as a pathway to engage with individuals. And then you obviously have to understand the historical and social context and needs of different audiences or different consumers. And so listening and leaning into communities and decision makers and key stakeholders is really critical in being able to refine and structure your assessments as well as your recommendations. And so we facilitate community-based assessments or landscape assessments to really understand what the priorities are for different stakeholders, understand what the mobility needs and opportunities are, identify assets, so do asset mapping, understand the strengths and the local resources that might support programs and policies, and work with partners to decide how best to address this issue or specific issue that we're dealing with in regards to mobility. And then also, it's really important as you're partnering with diverse communities, diverse partners, is to be transparent in that relationship and also make sure that they have the technical capacity to continue to facilitate moving the work forward. Also, they need to be engaged in the planning process, so helping to identify and define the problems while creating the goals. And then, recognizing strengths of community partners. They have a variety of skills, talents, as well as perspectives to share. And what we always say is that when you work with a variety of decision makers, partners, community members, things move at the speed of trust. So you really have to do the initial work and to build that trust relationship, to build the accountability in order to move the work forward and have a sustained working relationship. And so if you'd like to find out more about the variety of issues that encompass e-mobility from, what's the role of utilities, how do you accelerate or transition transit to being electrified, so launching electric buses, consumer engagement, what are the best ways to work with community members, community stakeholders to make this transition, as well as thinking about the role, say, of women or diverse communities in this conversation and looking at the public health implications. This E-Mobility, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference is our national conference that we facilitate in partnership with Ford. And so it's a 2-day, half-day conference. It's the only conference of its nature or kind in the world. And it is due to the generous sponsorship, we are able to offer free registration to community-based partners, nonprofits as well. So definitely dial in to attending this conference so that you can learn more about some of these issues and take the best practices back to your different communities. And one of the things that we are very committed to in terms of this conference is that the speakers at this conference are representing diverse communities and many of the frontline communities that bear the brunt of these issues. And so we represent stakeholders from around the country, not just in the progressive markets that are moving faster in the electrification process in other communities. So definitely there's a wide variety of perspectives and information that will be shared at this meeting. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share some findings and some information around how we can accelerate electrification to all communities in a way that's accessible. So we have to do the work, and it starts with understanding the community context, their needs, their attitudes, beliefs, and knowledge around e-mobility and electrification. So thank you, and look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Shally Francis. And now we will be hearing from Valerie from EPA. So Valerie, if you want to start sharing screen.
And Valerie, I don't know
Okay.
if you're on mute, if we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I can see my PowerPoint, so let me know if there are any connectivity issues. Hi everyone, I'm Valerie Eskenazi with EPA Region 2, and EPA's regional office covers New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So hello today from my island of Long Island in New York. And for this webinar, I'll be speaking with you about funding opportunities for emissions reduction projects. As was mentioned earlier with the word cloud, sometimes cost and affordability can be a barrier for electric vehicle adoption. So EPA and also the federal government with the IRS has several programs to help offset some of those upfront costs, either in the form of tax credits for electric vehicles or in the context of EPA grant programs. So both non-competitive and competitive grant programs, and also a rebate program for school bus replacement projects.
Yeah.
Hear a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, I'll take care of it. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be sharing a lot of information, but I just hope that it gives you an idea of some of the programs that are out there. So if you either are thinking of buying an electric vehicle or if you're a business that owns equipment or larger, heavier duty diesel trucks, that you can think about some of the possibilities and reach out to me with any questions, either to replicate projects that have already been done, or would love to speak to you about other potential projects. Because as has already been mentioned, if we transition to electric vehicles, there are real benefits there for the environment and public health. So for the dozen of you or so who had indicated on the poll that you were considering purchasing an electric vehicle, I wanted to make sure you were aware of these Irs tax credits, one for the purchase of light duty passenger vehicles starting at $2,500, and depending on the vehicle, it's a sliding scale based on the battery capacity. So the rebate tax credit could go all the way anywhere from $2,500 up to $7,500. And it does phase out at a certain point. So if you're looking at a particular model, just make sure you check the IRS website to check what the current tax credit applicability is. And also, if you're interested in installing a charging station for that vehicle, the IRS has a tax credit where you can get a credit for generally 30% of the installation costs of the electric charger, or $1,000 towards that installation, whichever is the lesser amount. So when it comes to EPA programs, shifting from the IRS to EPA, there are 4 different programs, and they all have slightly different eligibility criteria, different timelines, slightly different in the way that they're run. But I just wanted to highlight that all 4 of these programs, the Virgin Islands is eligible to participate in. So the links are here, but I'll give a couple of highlights for each of them, starting with the school bus rebate program, because this one is currently open right now. EPA is accepting applications. So if you are listening to this and you are with the public schools or own buses that the school district is contracting with, please reach out to me, because there is a rebate program where it's not a grant program, it's a reimbursement program. So it's a lot more straightforward, where you can put in an application to get reimbursed for the cost of a new vehicle, either $20,000 for the cost of a new diesel school bus, or $65,000 for a zero emission battery electric school bus. And applicants are chosen at random, but it's a great way of reducing children's exposure to diesel emissions, especially because in the Virgin Islands, just like on the mainland, children are more likely to have asthma. So that is the school bus rebate program. You just would need to check to see what the weight and age of the vehicle is, but feel free to reach out. I won't get into that level of detail. So for the grant programs, it requires a little bit more paperwork to put in applications for these type of projects. But as was mentioned earlier, it really takes a lot of partnership between all these different entities, the government, community groups, individuals, to figure out what types of opportunities there are and to try to make these projects happen. So since it's Energy Awareness Month, I just wanted to highlight that EPA grant funds through the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act program can be used for any of these types of eligible projects. And when it comes to transportation electrification, the replacement or retrofit of vehicles, their engines, or other non-road equipment from diesel to electric are eligible projects. So if you're an owner of any of that type of equipment, again, whether you're a private fleet owner who has school buses, if you own trucks or other construction type equipment, or even marine vessels that use diesel engines, you could be eligible to replace or retrofit your equipment to electric using EPA funding. It's just important to note that you wouldn't be eligible to apply directly. You would have to partner with a territory agency or a nonprofit to put together these proposals, but I'm here to help as well with any way I can help connect or talk through eligibility and brainstorm some of these projects. I'd be happy to do that, especially because there are, again, slight differences between some of these programs. So for example, to apply for the National JIRA grant program, your project would be evaluated against other projects in New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, whereas there is this separate program now for the insular areas, so the Virgin Islands, Guam, Samoa, and the Mariana Islands, with a separate grant competition for these types of projects. So different funding amounts, but it's important to note that for both of these, there is no mandatory cost share for these projects like there would be in the mainland and Alaska and Hawaii. So no cost share for the Virgin Islands. And then if you're watching this and you do own any of this type of equipment, or you know others that might be eligible, please share this information. The main things that you would need to know are you would need to certify that the vehicle you're trying to replace or electrify, that it is operational, that it works, that you own it, that it would be in service for at least 2 more years if it wasn't being replaced, that it's used for a minimum amount of miles per year or hours per year, and that just sign off on all that information to the EPA. So lastly, I'll just mention this non-competitive grant program, and it's amazing to hear about all the work that the Virgin Islands territory government is already doing. EPA has set aside money each year for state and territory governments to develop some of their own projects, and that's really designed to give states and territories their own flexibility when it comes to trying to implement some of these transportation and electrification projects. So what could an example look like for the Virgin Islands? There are all these different categories, but I wanted to just pull at least one of what it could look like taken from the JIRA program guidance. So one of the things that can be replaced from diesel to electric is medium and heavy duty trucks. And if you're wondering what these class ratings mean, they would be any of these larger vehicles, for example, delivery trucks or beverage trucks, garbage trucks, dump trucks. So any of these would be eligible for funding for replacement through the JIRA program. And to give you an idea of what this has looked like in Region 2 and also other parts of the US, this is one project that was completed last year where a public school district on Long Island, the Bayshore Public School District, they partnered with their bus fleet that they contract with, and they purchased 4 electric buses and also installed the charging infrastructure for the ability to charge these. And they have a huge fleet, but even just the swap out of 4 makes a difference when it comes to the emissions on these buses, the local air quality, and then also just showing other school districts that this kind of thing is possible. And when it comes to savings, there were definitely some operational cost savings because these buses typically would use about 1,500 gallons of gas a year. So even for 4 buses, that's saving right there 6,000 gallons of gas a year and having an environmental impact. And being on Long Island, I rely on ferries a lot around the New York area. So I thought this example might resonate with you all also. This was an example in Alabama where it was very unique because the Alabama Department of Transportation, they actually swapped out the diesel engines in this passenger and vehicle ferry, and they retrofitted it so that it became 100% electric. And they installed charging stations on the shore so that it could charge while being docked between trips on this, I think the Alabama River in Alabama. So I hope that gives you an idea of just some of the potential projects that are out there, things that have been done, things that could be done. There is more information at epa.gov/JIRA about the eligibility requirements, but again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about JIRA or how best it could work to try to get some of this funding to the Virgin Islands. And thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And also, I just want to let everybody know that the slides will be shared after the presentation, probably tomorrow. So if you are like wanting to go back or something and look at these slides a bit further, then you should be able to. And also it's recorded, so you can always go back and listen again. But now I'd like to start with some questions. We did run a bit late, so we will probably go over a little bit to get all the questions. But if you have to leave early, then we totally understand. So first, just reading through the chat, there was one question about the estimated electricity costs associated with level 1 charging. So charging from the home for a typical EV. So I don't know which of the presenters wants to tackle this first question.
Here, maybe I'll just give a maybe a quick overview, and if there's any follow-up, I'll be open for that. But probably the rule of thumb that I would use, maybe I'll give an example of a Nissan Leaf, given that that's one of the more popular ones and the vehicle I'm pretty familiar with. So that battery pack is 40 kilowatt hours, and it's actually agnostic for us in the territory, since we have static rates. So we don't have, at least at the residential level, and only at some of the large power users do they have demand charges. So we have pretty static, simple rates. So if you're at a residential and you're looking at 45 cents for 42 cents a kilowatt hour for a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, whether it's a level 1 or level 2, a full 0 to full charge is going to be within the range of, maybe $12 to $16, depending on, looking at just a simple 40 cents per kilowatt hour to charge a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack. And that's really the math you can use and apply anywhere, in terms of if you looked at any vehicle and saw, like, for example, a Tesla, I think they have maybe closer to 60 or 70 kilowatt hour battery pack. Using our electrical rate is going to be a very easy way to understand what a full charge cost would be. But bear in mind, the average person, so you're not charging from 0 to full charge every day. And it really kind of comes down to your usage profile. So if you are using your vehicle extensively, then, or you're depleting a full 40 kilowatt hours a day and have to recharge every day, that could be the window you live in. But to just give a concept, 40 kilowatt hours of storage in a Nissan Leaf gives you over 150 miles of range for typical driving. So you can also understand how many days it may take to actually fully discharge your battery at that rate. So it's a great question. I think maybe it might be an opportunity for us to provide some kind of basic metrics for people to understand. The math is very simple, and so if we maybe just break it down, maybe that might be a project for us, Ariel, to have some, kind of a pamphlet of a kind of expected cost, so that way people can understand what the impacts could be depending on various factors, because it is variable. I think you're on mute, Ariel.
Oh yeah, you're still muted. Okay. It seems that Ariel has some technical difficulties. Let me see if there's another question. So there's a question about if there's any difference if you charge your EV using solar or wind, in terms of the amount of time that would take, et cetera, et cetera. I think you answered some of that, but if you can just touch upon the fact that the power source, does or doesn't matter.
Yeah, so yeah, the energy source doesn't matter. The vehicle certainly is agnostic to that. So if you have a solar or wind or any generation system that's creating AC power and a single unit of energy being a rate is per kilowatt hour. So it obviously you're not looking at the 42 cents per kilowatt hour cost if you're using any type of renewable. That could be, and so yeah, so it would certainly be different than the 42 cents a kilowatt hour. It can certainly be viewed at zero, or if you're factoring in the cost of your system as the rate in which you associate with your per unit cost of energy would be another way, but it would certainly be less. If you're using a renewable source, it would be less than what your utility rate would be.
So thank you. So we are pretty much at time. Is there one last question that the audience would like to ask?
How about, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Larry.
My question is, if you're going to charge from home with a Whopper bill, it may not be cost efficient unless Whopper can change their pricing structure. But when I installed my solar, I was put in as a large power customer versus the way I was. And now I'm paying a higher rate. So can we have chargers powered by solar and wind?
So we've actually received grants or funding to have a variety of charging infrastructure, not just simply the pedestal mounted grid coupled, but also we've received funding for off-grid charging stations as well. So it's certainly possible, and the technology most definitely exists, and we have received resources to diversify the methods in which we create the EV infrastructure network in the territory. So yes, it's definitely a possibility.
Thank you, Kyle, and thanks for wonderful information you shared, Kyle, and congratulations on your work. And CGTC, you guys are doing a fantastic job bringing wonderful information on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Harith. And I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's very exciting webinar series and presentation series. As Ariel mentioned, this is part of Energy Month, but it's also part of the launch of our comprehensive energy strategy planning effort that CGTC and Energy Office are working on together. So please continue to attend the webinars. We will have one more webinar next week, which will be very exciting, looking at solutions that folks are doing in their own house to try to achieve some form of energy resilience. So that's going to be very exciting. But also, please look out, throughout the rest of the month and early next year for other events that we will be doing as part of our outreach effort for the comprehensive energy strategy. And for this effort, we will be talking again about transportation and again about what we want transportation to be for the territory, so that we can better leverage some of the funding opportunities that were discussed today. But we will be also talking about, and I think this some of you are very sensitive to it, the environmental impact, climate change impact, but also other resilience aspects related to energy and sustainable use of energy in the territory. So thank you. Keep in touch. See you next week, and hopefully see you at our next event as part of our comprehensive energy strategy. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone.